This is Frank the Pest Geek, and we use Pest Routes. Pest Routes is the #1 pest control software to supercharge your business. Check them out at pestroutes.com. We're going to be discussing tramp ants, and there's about 7 of them that are just a nightmare, and they have 6 habits that everyone needs to know. So we're going to get started with this lesson. Now, what are tramp ants? Well, tramp ants are a series of a species of ants that have similar traits. And one of the traits is that they're called tramp ants is because they jump aboard ships, trains, anything they can, cargo, and then they get transported across continents, and they get established as what is known as an invasive exotic pest. So most of the ants that you have in your home that are a problem, and most of the ones us professionals deal with, are exotic invasive tramp ants. That's the majority of them. Okay, the other thing that they have is that they will invade structures. They will invade hospitals, homes, anything that they can find is what they prefer. Why? Because ants and pretty much all insects are opportunistic, and they need 4 basic things. They need a way in, they need shelter, food, and they need harborage. So if they can get all those things, and water, if they can get those 4, then they will be successful. And guess what? Your home has all 4 of those things. Now, we're talking about the Argentine ant, and this is one of the nightmarish ants that people in Mediterranean climates like California, they have. So California has a big problem with Argentine ants. So this is one of the tramp ants. Also, we have big-headed ant. Now, big-headed ant is a huge problem here in South Florida and around pretty much all of the panhandle across the bottom of the United States, Texas, California, all those states near coastal lines, they have a big problem with big-headed ant. And as you can see here on the image, that's a big-headed ant worker right there. It's a little bit out of focus. Here's another one right here, and here's another one right here. The workers, as you can see there, are all little. They're minor. And these guys can get in through anywhere. So trying to seal your house up, especially if you've got a 100-year-old wooden house with these problems, it's almost impossible. So these are common issues that we're having with big-headed ants. Now, crazy ants are crazy because of the way they walk. And they walk all over the place, very erratic. They don't have one particular pattern. They walk really fast, and they're really skinny. Okay? They're known as the longhorn crazy ant because of this long, you can see it's broken right here, and it's really long. And that is why they're known as the longhorn crazy ant. A lot of people get them confused with white-footed ants because they're black. Most of them are black colored. But the white-footed ant walks very, very slowly. It's a lot huskier in build, and it has this little white feet that if you look at it under a lens, you can see them. Most to the naked eye cannot be seen. But there is a big difference between the crazy ant. Big-headed, white-footed ant will walk in mostly trails and up and down. That seems to be or across edges when they get up in the roofs and attics. Now, the ghost ant. The ghost ant is a nightmare. We got it here in South Florida. It's a nightmare in Brazil. It's a nightmare in South America. It's a nightmare all over the world because it is such a tiny little ant. It can get through anything. And that is what happens. And because of all these nesting habits, the way they nest, it becomes a nightmare. But this guy down here in Florida is he's got a cousin in the north, the OHA, the odorous house ant, which is in the same family. But we got here the pharaoh ant, and what you see with the pharaoh ant, you notice it has wings. Well, actually, most of these ants have wings, especially when their reproductive males and females are going to reproduce. They all put out wings. So people will see ants flying and think they have termites in their home, and they don't. They have ants that are mating, and this is how they mate. Now, some ants will leave the nest to mate. What's typical about these guys is that they stay in the nest to mate, which is, a lot more productive. So you got here the odorous house ant. I told you it was a cousin of the ghost ant. And this one in particular, you see the wings. It has 2 pairs of wings. You see them there. And that little guy is also a nightmare along the north part, in the central part of the United States. Then we get to the white-footed ant. Why is it a white-footed ant? Well, if you look at the little feet right here, right around here, you can see that whiting area right around there. And that guy is a nightmare because that guy also makes what is known as mega colonies, a super colony. Some of these ants will make 100,000 in one nest. Okay, so they're super. They're going into your attic, and you see them trailing out, and then you start seeing them all over the top floor or over the bathroom because they got in and they're nesting in the attics. And very tough to just control with sprays. If you put sprays in that attic or a fog or a bomb, you'll make a mess. Okay, so that is not something you want to do. But they all have what are known as the 6 traits. And what are these 6 traits? Well, they're unicolonial, they're polygynous, they're also polygamous, they're omnivorous, they bud, and they fragment. And this is a problem. Why? Let's look at each one individually. We got to think of these ants as unicolonial, that they make these networks of colonies. They don't make one colony, they make networks of colonies. So the idea is if you see this white one here, and then they're going to make what is known as a budding colony over here and another budding colony. And what they do is they do it nearby. So that is a big problem. You can have in one kitchen 10, 12, 20 ghost ant nests if it's gotten bad enough, and if you've done it wrong and you fragmented them, then it becomes worse. Okay, so now you have a polygynous ant, and what does that mean? Is that they have also multiple queens in the nest. So one nest can have 10 queens and 100 workers, a 10-to-1 ratio. And they are, very giving because they will basically share everything with every other in the network. So that is the problem, that it's a network of ants that produce highly. They're also polygamous. Now, polygamy is when they will breed nearby nests. They make them really close to each other. They're not really far apart. They will share everything. Like I said, this is a common thing in every part of this, is that they share everything. They will share the eggs, the brood, the food, the workers, the queens. Everything is shared. In omnivorous ants, this is another problem because they will eat everything. I get calls all the time, people saying, I got sugar ants, and people think they got sugar ants, and they're using nothing but sugar baits that they buy over the counter, and some of these don't work. And they'll buy the little stations, and the little stations won't work. And the reasoning is they're not understanding that these insects change their feeding habit, and during certain times of the year, they're going to have different feeding habits. They're going to have one feeding habit in the winter and another feeding habit in the summer. They're going to eat more glucose when they need to produce more eggs than when they need to just survive the winter. And if you got a house that has a crawl space, for instance, well, guess what? You can get cats in there and rats in there and roaches in there, and they will take those flea eggs from the rodents, they will take them from the cat, and they will survive on that. They will also eat, as you can see here, they're taking what appears to be an American cockroach, and they will devour that. Now, that is a little yellow crazy ant, and that one will devour anything. So now you have a process called budding. And what is budding? Well, budding is when they kick out a queen or they leave the nest and they go out and take workers with them to start another bud. Get it? It's kind of like the buds in a flower. So they belong to the same flower, but they're independent leaves. And this is why it's a problem, because they do it both for survival and they also do it because they're disturbed. So that is a problem in a kitchen or in a home where people are spraying stuff, they're slamming doors, they're removing pots and pans, and all of this is causing them to make more nests. Now, budding is different than fragmenting. Fragmentation happens usually by disturbance. You went to the store and you bought a can of spray roach killer or ant killer, and you sprayed it all over the place. What you don't know is that most people don't understand is that roach sprays are repellent by nature. They're pyrethroids, and pyrethroids have a repellency component to them. If you spray your kitchen down or a pest control guy comes and sprays the inside of that home with a pyrethroid, the chances are you're going to cause them to fragment. If you're slamming the doors, you moved the plates, you're going to cause them by normal activity to fragment. What these ants survive is they thrive more in environments that are highly active. So communities that have a lot of activity, they're close together in cookie cutter communities that you got 6,000 to 9,000 square foot lots in townhomes, apartments, because there's the trash can being moved, the lawn is being mowed. It doesn't happen so much in rural areas. So they thrive in these environments. This is why they're a big problem in homes. Okay, so fragmentation is a big problem. Now, with fragmentation, what happens is they will leave the nest and they will move their eggs and they will divide the queens and divide the workers and divide the brood, and they will basically go over to other people's homes. So you knock on the door and say, "Hi, we're here. You know, we had to leave because we got disturbed. Can we move in? We have food and we have water and we have all this cool stuff. Can we come over?" Sure, why not? See what happens? So they're not antagonistic toward each other. They're very receptive. Unlike other ants that have colonies that are very, very antagonistic, Tramp ants do not do that. They do not fight with each other. And that's why they're able to survive, and that's why they're able to thrive. So in conclusion, what you have to make sure is that as a professional, you understand the biology. Now, where do you get the biology? Well, you get it from different places. You can get a Malice guide, or you can get from Purdue University Pest Management, the book that they use for pest management. Those are great, but they're expensive. Between $100 and $200 for each one. You can also go to University Pest Entomology Department, and you can Google it inside, or you can search for it inside the entomology department website. That is your best choice because that information is free. It is very thorough. It is written in your state, and those entomologists understand those problems in your state. So you can get a positive ID on the pest that you have, and you cannot form a protocol until you have created a good ID. Then you can design and say, okay, this bait works best. This active ingredient works best. Do I use a glucose? Do I water it down? Do I use a granular bait? Do I use a scatter granule? What synthetic do I use? And which non-repellent do I use? So there's a lot of things to consider when you're controlling this. If you don't understand the behavior, you tend up making it worse. Okay, so this is what you need to know. Hey, by the way, if you like this podcast, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel right now. And also the little bell, go ahead and click on that. Every time we produce one of these, about once a week to several times a week, you're going to get a new video. And this is Frank the Pest Geek, wishing you a pestacular day.